with its temples dedicated to dark gods, books imbued with strange powers, and many hints of human sacrifice. Fallout's cosmic horror story comes as a very unexpected surprise. It is a 3-part tale told across 2 games and 1 piece of downloadable content, so let's not waste any more time and begin the horror. While travelling Fallout 3's capital wasteland, you might come across a small settlement named Girdershade, housed beneath a crumbling freeway. Chatting to one of its residents, Ronald Laren, you'll also learn of the mysterious Dunwich Building.
My friend, you are at the ass end of the capital wasteland. If it weren't for Sierra, I'd be out of here. One thing I can tell you is stay the hell away from the Dunwich Building to the south. That place is bad mojo. I don't know what that place is about, but I hear about weird shit going on.
If you're anything like me, being told to stay away from somewhere is like a red rag to a bull, and your immediate reaction will be to make a beeline straight for it. From the outside, the Dunwich Building doesn't look like much. Compared to Tenpenny Tower, which looms large nearby, it's a drab, innocuous, uninspiring structure, one which does not stand out in the slightest until you get a little closer. If you're paying any sort of attention, it will become instantly apparent that this isn't just any old wasteland ruin. As you reach its entrance, your compass is pointing south, but after heading inside, it suddenly begins to point north. Strange. Meters ahead of you is a skeleton surrounded by scorch marks and ammo crates, more on him later, and nearby you'll find another, the remains of someone who tried to unsuccessfully barricade themselves inside a small storage room. There are also 5 audio diaries strewn haphazardly across a table. They tell the story of Jamie Palabra, who found the Dunwich Building while searching for his missing father.
He must have been trying to trap food here. I recognize his snares. I can make out a building on the horizon. That must be where he headed. If not, at least I get a roof tonight.
And in another room, a 6th can be found, guarded by a pair of ghouls who waste no time charging straight at you. It seems Jamie was immediately wary of his unsettling surroundings.
Don't like the look of this place. Don't like the smell. Gives me the creeps. Don't want to risk a shot at the crows till I know what's in there. Sneaking in tonight.
The only way forwards is up a staircase, which leads to a large office area full of ghouls. What makes everything which has happened so far and events to come so wonderful is that it all unfolds completely out of the blue. There are a lot of dungeons in Fallout 3 which contain ghouls, and there are a lot which feature well-executed environmental storytelling, but so often they're attached to side quests announced with big green letters on your screen, or they're very short forays lasting no more than a few minutes. Conversely, the Dunwich Building is not a mission added to your log, nor is it a brief affair. It's a frightening, incredibly detailed romp with enough substance to be a titled side quest which arrives completely unexpectedly. That gives it a lot of power. Of course, if you know what you're in for having watched a video like this, it loses some effect, and as a fan of horror video games myself, I'd not describe it as the absolute scariest thing you'll ever play, but that first time through is magical, in the worst way possible. There are so many details it's easy to miss if you rush straight through it, even during these early stages. A door opens of its own accord as you approach. Computers have also been rigged to explode as soon as you interact with them, although there are warning signs in the form of the spinning antennas protruding from them. The groaning, creaking soundtrack will very quickly get under your skin too. If you remain unperturbed, perhaps the human head left on a desk next to Jamie's 7th audio diary, or the bloodstains on the walls and torso on the floor, will be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Interestingly though, if you're wearing the ghoul mask when you reach this section, the head and torso won't be there. I've no idea why, but it's probably an oversight or a glitch rather than anything meaningful. It's clear by this point that Jamie found himself in an awful lot of trouble.
The raiders told spook stories about zombies in the ruins. Never saw anything like that where I come from. Lord help me. They're real. Not quite what Thor said, but close. These things look... I think they really used to be people.
There is only one path forward, a door which leads to the forsaken Dunwich ruins. Seconds after entering, you're able to momentarily see into the past before the man in front of you is promptly replaced by a glowing ghoul, a brilliant scare. The cries of more ghouls from the floor above hopefully won't be enough to distract you from the remaining functional terminal in the room either. It is loaded with dictation software and contains several logs. The first is a message to employees who worked for Dunwich Borers LLC, the company who owned the building and made drills for excavation work, thanking them for a successful product launch. What follows after is far darker. A pair of messages were created on the 23rd of October 2077 and both feature only nonsense, as if the computer was attempting to turn noises into words. In fact, that's exactly what happened. The 23rd of October 2077 is when the Great War between the USA and China began, with the gibberish on screen likely the result of the software trying to translate the beginning of a thermonuclear war. Nothing else was recorded until the machine picked up a voice nearly 57 years later. Over slightly more than a month, 3 more entries are created. In the first, someone seems to be trying to keep something made out of paper safe. In the second, they speak of their skin falling off as unknown forces attack. And in the third, they've completely lost their mind, talking about something known as Qualtoth and a deep temple. Next to the terminal lies Jamie's 8th audio diary too.
God help me. I found Dad today. I didn't think it was him, but... face. The zombies didn't touch him. I think he was becoming like them. Didn't know it was him until I found that old book near him. No more killing. I just need to go. Can't forget the book. All I have left of him. It's warm against the stone. I'll just rest a while.
Between both the computer and the diary, events are left somewhat open to interpretation. What we can say for almost certain is that Jamie found his father and likely killed him, not realising until the deed was done who he once was, picked up a book he was carrying with him, and then began to rapidly transform into a ghoul himself. Who the last 3 computer logs belong to is less obvious, although there are really only 2 possibilities. The first is that it's Jamie speaking. After finishing his 8th diary, he slumped next to the computer to rest for a while, and it picked up his voice as he descended into madness. An argument could also be made that it's possibly his father, given Jamie discovered him nearby, but I'd say that's the less plausible explanation. I think Jamie reached the area after leaving several audio diaries along the way, found his father and dispatched him, recorded the 8th entry, and then stayed in the vicinity for several weeks, with his ramblings and attempts to keep the book safe from intruders recorded by the computer. You're also able to gain some insight into those intruders themselves. Unlocking this door, you find while rummaging around the floor above, objects creepily fall by themselves and another skeleton lies on the ground. Whoever that person was used the terminal on the desk before they passed. It details their efforts to scavenge from the Dunwich Building and the trouble they ran into as they were caught off guard by the horrors lurking within. Trapped in the room with ghouls roaming around close by, they awaited the arrival of their friend Billy, who was due to join them with ammunition and grenades. Unfortunately, Billy didn't make it very far at all. Remember the skeleton right by the entrance with ammo and grenades next to them? Yeah, those are the remains of Billy. A few more ghouls need to be dealt with as you edge ever more nervously forward through the next area, at the end of which is a door leading to the virulent underchambers. Upon entering, Jamie's final audio diary can be found directly ahead of you.
Sharp knife. Sharp knife to send him to Deep Temple. Flay and say my words. Abdul comes again on the feast of the weaker. Feast for the Deep Temple. Born again. Here. Al-Hazared! Yes! Yes!
Aside from battling back more monsters, most of your time spent in the underchambers involves travelling ever downwards, first through holes in the floor and then using stairs in a maintenance area. It's the in-world manifestation of the idea of spiralling into insanity, of journeying further into the literal and metaphorical depths from which there may truly be no escape. Also, as if proceedings weren't tense enough already, the music stops playing and you're left with only a faint background hum, and your own thoughts. At the bottom, another door and then tunnels. A voice, not a human one, can suddenly be heard in the background. Here you finally meet Jamie, who is worshipping something, as well as a few other ghouls, and you actually gain karma for putting him down, so evil and twisted has he become. The reason why the Dunwich Building is such a horrendous place also finally becomes apparent. A strange obelisk sits in the centre of the cave, one side adorned with skulls, the other with vines and a woman reaching out, the source, presumably, of the nightmarish situation you've been forced to reckon with. At this point, there's little else to do other than to exit as fast as your legs can carry you. Even as you retrace your steps to conclude this chilling adventure, however, things still aren't quite right. To understand what's wrong, you need only recount the trip you've just taken. Entering the Dunwich Building at ground level, you go up to the first floor and then down another set of stairs, so when you arrive at the forsaken Dunwich ruins, you're still at ground level. You then go up some stairs and then eventually up once more, so you're on the second floor, before dropping back down to the first to enter the virulent underchamber. Everything adds up so far as you can see the second and presumably highest floor directly above you as you are on the first, and you then drop down 3 levels, which by my estimation would leave you 2 floors below ground level in the basement. Reaching the maintenance area, you go down this flight of stairs and a second longer set right after, which is followed by your visit to Jamie and the obelisk. Ignoring the descent and descent into the caves, they cancel each other out. To escape, you go up this flight of stairs and one more, go through a door facing west, and somehow emerge facing east, all the way up on the first floor near the entrance again. The geometry does not make sense at all. Of course, there's always the possibility it was a bodge job by Bethesda to ensure you didn't spend an age walking back to where you started, but with them pulling the compass trick a second time, I'm inclined to think it was intentional, and a very clever way of keeping you on edge right up until you leave. At long last, you're able to do a runner and once again breathe capital wasteland air that, after the ordeal you've just been through, smells sweeter than it ever did before. Prior to moving to Chapter 2, we need to take an extremely brief break to do some extracurricular research, and we will do so at the end of each of this video's 3 major segments. On pages 77 and 78 of Fallout 3's official game guide, you can find a character bio for Jamie. Amongst other things, it says that his dad travelled to the Capital Wasteland specifically to return to its source, a thick book bound in leather and stamped with strange glyphs. On page 102, there's another bio for Ugg Qualtoth. The first sentence is the one to pay attention to. It says, "A strange altar found in the depths of this building may hold the key to discovering more about this previously unknown entity." We knew about the book already, but the Dunwich Building being its source and the obelisk in the cave also being an altar, that's all brand new information. I am someone who generally errs on the side of caution when it comes to details which appear in sources outside the game or games I'm covering, but with these both being part of the official guide Bethesda contributed to and edited, I feel fairly comfortable considering them canon. With the Dunwich Building but a distant memory, our protagonist continued on their merry way, relieved their real-life horror story had concluded, and if you played Fallout 3 at launch, that was the end of the affair for you too, at least until the game's 4th piece of downloadable content landed 8 months later. Introducing Point Lookout, an entirely new area featuring an escapade separated from the Capital Wasteland by a boat ride, the tale it tells is one mostly disconnected from that which unfolds on the mainland. But not entirely. There are many weird and wonderful locations to discover as you explore the swampland, and one of the first you'll likely set eyes on is the Disaster Relief Outpost. Situated a stone's throw from where you dock, it's little more than a collection of tents set up by a missionary named Marcella.
"We try to improve the state of the wasteland by doing good where we can, and by spreading the word of the Bible. We also recover and restore religious relics that we can find, but that's a secondary goal."
Her history and her thoughts regarding the area are interesting enough, but the juiciest tidbit is contained within one of the logs found on her terminal. She writes that she met a local named Obadiah Blackhall who asked her to retrieve a family heirloom, a book. Marcella investigates and later provides an update which reads, "Confirmed Blackhall connection with regional beliefs. Appears that a recent ancestor to Obadiah named Constance Blackhall acquired obscure text known as the Kriv Beknir. Not good. Have heard mention of the book before. Must destroy." You won't have to wait long to meet Obadiah himself. As you continue on your travels, you'll eventually spot a huge house over the horizon, Blackhall Manor. Outside, unusual decorations line the path to its front door, and inside there are a couple of troubling discoveries to be made. Downstairs, cutlery sits atop a billiards table also decorated with a bloody handprint, and upstairs there is a human skull on a plinth. Obadiah Blackhall sits in a wheelchair nearby, and speaking with him you can begin the quest, The Dark Heart of Blackhall. He asks that you retrieve a book, presumably the Krivbekna mentioned by Marcella in her log, which he believes the swamp folk have.
I'm glad you think so. Conversation is but one of the virtues that separate us from cretins like those swamp folk. Swamp folk who, I should mention, absconded with a book, a precious family heirloom. I wanted to ask you, friend, will you get it back?
Apparently, it's not just any old book either.
They think the book has a kind of occult power. Superstition and nonsense, of course.
It's likely the Krivbekna is the Necronomicon, or Book of the Dead, a tome featured in the works of author H.P. Lovecraft, which contains the information needed to summon powerful ancient beings beyond humanity's comprehension. Bethesda clearly took a lot of inspiration from Lovecraft, with a big clue being mention of the names Abdul and Alhazred in Jamie's final audio diary.
Abdul comes again on the feast of the weaker, feast for the deep, temple, born again, here, Alhazred.
In Lovecraft's works, Abdul Alhazred is the mystic who created the Necronomicon, and the Dunwich Building itself and the Dunwich Borers the company housed there are named after one of his novellas, The Dunwich Horror. With 1,000 caps up for grabs should you succeed, there's no time to lose. As soon as you step foot back in the swamp, Marcella appears, begging you to reconsider.
Obadiah's no better than the heathens he's asked you to steal it from. He believes he can use it to control them, and God knows what else. There's a way to destroy that damned thing. I intend to do just that.
Next, you have 2 jobs to do. First, you need to find and secure the book, and then you'll have to make a choice about what to do with it. Marcella will return to her outpost after your conversation, and while you can seek her out, she has little else to say. The same is true of Obadiah too. The only thing left to do is head to the ritual site, the entrance to which is guarded by several swamp folk you'll have to cut down to gain entry. It's worth noting that you can head here whenever you please, even if you've not started the quest, but unless you've done so, the path leading further underground will be blocked. It's unlikely you'll have realised that the Dunwich Building and the quest you're embarking on at present are connected prior to arriving here, given the only common thread is a mysterious book mentioned only briefly by Jamie.
No more killing. I just need to go. Can't forget the book. All I have left of him.
The link between them now starts to become much clearer. When you reach the caves at the bottom of the Dunwich Building, an unnatural voice could be heard. Which sounds almost the same, if not identical, to that heard here. Within a temple of some description, you can also find strange liquid bubbling up from beneath the earth, and this lovely scene one can assume was the handiwork of the swamp folk. Deeper still, you'll find this distressing scene. A mutilated body lies on an altar, a ritual knife lodged in a doll where its head once was, with several stim packs left next to it, used perhaps to keep the poor person in question alive for as long as possible. The Krivbekna also sits on a lectern, dampened by what appears to be fresh blood. You take it, and as you hurry to the site's exit with your prize, you'll have to fend off several more swamp folk who arrive to stop you leaving with their most valued possession. Back outside, it's time to make your choice. Considering everything that's happened, I'd wager most will return to Marcella. Unfortunately, however, when arriving at her outpost, you'll be confronted by a gang of smugglers, and inside her tent, a horrible scene awaits. Marcella has been murdered, Die Thief has been scrawled in blood on her tent, and bloody handprints have been left on her desk. They look very similar to that found on Obadiah's billiards table, coincidentally. With her dying breaths, the missionary was able to record a final message, begging you to destroy the Krivbekna by returning somewhere you're already quite familiar with. I'm sure you can guess by now where.
In the capital wasteland, seek a place called Dunwich. Within is an obelisk, itself a wicked thing. It'll consume the book. You need only press the book to its surface.
We're not going to do that yet though. Instead, let's see what Obadiah has to say for himself. When you reveal Marcella's fate, he implies the same could happen to you, likely a veiled threat which reveals he was responsible.
Forgive my indiscretion. Still, with her death, I see no reason for you to keep hold of that book. For all you know, the same fate may befall you.
Handing over the book and collecting your caps, he gets out of the wheelchair he apparently never needed to begin with and strolls over to a previously hidden basement, unless he gets stuck trying to get there, which I had happen twice. He is getting on in years, I suppose. Inside, he bows in front of an altar upon which lies the headless body of one of the swamp folk, with many other skeletons hidden under the floorboards. He occasionally mentions an unusual name.
A Qualtoth is returned. Be afraid, worms.
And Qualtoth is a name you've heard before. On a terminal in the Dunwich Building, you can find a transcription, presumably created when the machine overheard Jamie rambling, which mentions it too. If you make the decision not to give the book back to Obadiah and instead opt to destroy it once and for all, you'll need to journey back to the Dunwich Building's basement. You are then able to interact with the obelisk housed there, and when you do, you're told that it shares its origins with the Krivbeknir and that being near it makes you uneasy. Pressing the book to its surface, any ghouls nearby are set alight as energy radiates from it. You gain karma, and the dark heart of Blackhall is marked as completed. With the quest completed, no matter who you decide to help, and Chapter 2 at its end, it's again time to look at some supplementary information. Similar to earlier, it's taken from Fallout 3's official game guide. On page 662, yes, you heard that correctly, page 662 of a video game guide, you can find further information regarding Constance Blackhall, a relative of Obadiah who Marcella references on her terminal. It says that Constance was obsessed with the occult and was priestess of a sect centred on the Krivbeknir, which she'd managed to acquire. She lived an unnaturally long life until the book was stolen from her, at which point she expired. The sect then deteriorated, with what remained a collection of incoherent chants and rituals, their meanings long forgotten. 10 years later in world and 8 years later in real life, we return to the world of Fallout with the release of 4, with a new setting and a new protagonist. It introduced a third chapter to the series' cosmic horror story too, one which begins just as unexpectedly as those which precede it. A lot of new information is also imparted, and once we've worked through it, I'll spend some time talking about what I think is going on. As you explore the Commonwealth's northeast corner, you'll soon stumble across a huge open pit lined with marble, a quarry predating the Great War named Dunwich Borers. You'll have heard of them before. They are the company who operated out of the Capital Wasteland's Dunwich Building. If Fallout 3 taught us anything, it's that places with Dunwich in the name are not to be taken lightly, and your first inclination will either be to investigate or run. Assuming curiosity gets the better of you and you choose the first option, you'll hopefully catch the subtle early hints that all is not well. As you approach the location, a gunshot rings out, and following the sound leads to a hiding spot it's very easy to miss. It's also dangerous. Its entrance is lined with traps and heavily irradiated, and once navigated successfully, you find the source of the noise. A man named Hugo lies dead on a bed, a pistol lying next to him and blood splatters covering parts of the wall behind him. It's immediately apparent that he took his own life. A holotape, Hugo's struggle, can be found next to his body.
Guys don't bother me anymore. That's good. I think it's... What was that? Can't they read the signs? I think it's time I go back inside the quarry. It's been too long. No, I can't. The guys would never let me in. I could kill them all. No, that wouldn't be what it would want. It's time to lay down. Yes, of course. It's next to my bed. I will. It's loaded.
Created mere moments prior to your arrival, who or what the it he refers to is and who he's talking to towards the recording's end, we've no idea. What is abundantly clear, though, is that Hugo was not in his right mind. There's little else to discover for the time being, but plenty still to do, with a lot of Forged on guard duty. With them all dispatched, you can safely head to the bottom and to a door leading to the Dunwich Borers. Inside the mine, a lift takes you to a door which cannot yet be opened, and further along, a pair of raiders and a turret need to be dealt with in an area known as Station 1. A terminal loaded with pre-war correspondence can be found nearby. The Safety First section is featured on every one of them you come across from this point onwards. One message reminds Dunwich Borer's employees to wear eye protection due to 4 previous incidents, including one where someone lost an eye. Another talks of cost-cutting involving the beams supporting parts of the quarry and mentions rumblings, more on that later. The third is again about cost-cutting, this time involving safety railings, and asks for caution as several people had fallen to their death. Together, they paint the picture of a company which feigned concern for its employees but was reluctant to introduce any meaningful changes. That rings true when reading the upcoming events section as well, which is also featured on every terminal. The first message requests that employees drink responsibly during the happy hours held within the quarry after a man named Jerry fell to his death, and another asks that they keep an eye on their children during the annual picnic, which again takes place on the site, especially near ledges. If the Safety First messages simply make Dunwich Borers look negligent, then those in upcoming events make it almost seem as if they are encouraging the incidents, or at minimum turning a blind eye. No reasonable company would allow people to drink alcohol somewhere so incredibly dangerous, nor would they open it up to children. We learn more about Station 1's project manager, Bob Stanson, too. In one message, you find out that the section was doing good work and had been incident-free for 93 days, and in another that output was the highest it had been all year, even with his request for new support beams repeatedly denied. He also received a message from management asking that he straight away visit Section 4, the most recent communication he received. Moving on, Section 2 awaits a short walk away. 3 more forged block your path, and when they've been dealt with, you're able to access another terminal. As mentioned, the Safety First and upcoming events sections remain the same, as does the most recent message to Section 2's project manager, John Hatfield, which again asks him to immediately journey to Section 4. His others speak of good work being done, albeit slower than hoped due to Station 3, and output increasing 5% thanks to a new boring machine. Rounding a corner to Section 3, there are, to the surprise of no one watching, I'm sure, more raiders. There's also a circuit breaker you can use to brighten the place up a tad. Another terminal can be accessed too. This time it's the turn of Station 3's Bradley Ramone, the third project manager that Dunwich Borer's management sent to Section 4. His other 2 messages reference John at Station 2's frustration with the slow progress due to a lack of equipment, and he voices concerns about the railings which almost cause someone to fall. Heading down some steps which take you even deeper into the quarry, a mini-boss of sorts confronts you. Bedlam is one tough cookie, but if you're properly geared up and ready for a fight, she shouldn't prove too big an obstacle. If you were hoping this portion of the video might become slightly less terminal focused eventually, then you're in luck as it gets better after this one, I promise. But it is important we take note of Bedlam's logs here. We gain an understanding of why the Forged are present to collect scrap, a job that wasn't going altogether brilliantly, hence her being sent there. Her arrival proved positive for the faction, with 2 shipments sorted, but a crew also disappeared while attempting to clear out ghouls in the lower levels, prompting her to venture downwards. Bedlam's last message is disturbing to say the least. It's the phrase "I'm safe in the light," repeated over and over and over again. Close by, a door is chained shut. Moving through it, dead bodies and ghouls are found everywhere, and turning on the lights causes some of the monsters to rise up and begin their attack. It's a nice mechanic, one which is used frequently from here on out to decent effect. Reaching the end of the area, battered and bruised, you open a door and are briefly given a glimpse of the past. Something which happens with alarming regularity in areas with Dunwich in the name, like earlier when we were hot on the trail of Jamie. At long last, we reach the Dunwich Borer's final terminal and grab ourselves a lovely bobblehead too. There's no reading to do this time, but there is a holotape to listen to.
Tim Shoots here. No suspicions were raised when the new equipment was brought in the other day. Crew at Station 4 are still under the impression that we are setting up a new station beyond this area. The standing crew you hired are convincing enough. However, I do worry about the project managers at the other stations, especially Bob at Station 1. We all know he takes his job very seriously. His bullet point updates bug the hell out of me. My gut tells me figure out something's going on down here sooner rather than later. Please advise.
Overseeing the most secluded part of the quarry, Tim was at least somewhat aware of its true purpose compared to the other project managers who were left in the dark. Continuing forward, there's a second flashback. And Tim's grisly fate, as well as that of Bob, John and Bradley, is revealed. They never escaped the quarry, spending hundreds of years stuck there as ghouls. Searching Tim's ghoulified body, you find another holotape, this time from management to him.
Tim, good job on keeping things under wraps. We've taken your advice and have asked the other project managers to meet you at Station 4. Stall them if they arrive before we get there. They haven't been told anything. We are very close to accomplishing our goal. Please be patient, and you will be rewarded in time.
All that's left to do is dive into the pool where the altar once sat. At the bottom lies the partially uncovered face of what seems to be a gigantic sculpture, as well as the altar itself, upon which sits 2 mini-nukes and a special blade named Krem's Tooth. There are no new paths left in this section, and so you retrace your steps and head down a previously unexplored tunnel, fending off more ghouls along the way, until you reach a door which unlocks a route leading to the lift seen earlier and the exit. Before I lay out my theory explaining how I think everything is connected, we must first quickly look outside the games one last time, turning our attention to the rulebook for Fallout's tabletop role-playing game. Like the official game guide, it contains a fair bit of new information. Page 233 includes a huge section on the Dunwich Borers, with the headline being this particular passage. Richard Dunwich and his brother Constance Blackhall were known for an obsession with the occult. A marble quarry where they tested their drills was known to cover the site of an ancient temple to dark gods whose adherents routinely practiced human sacrifice. You've probably spotted the mistake here. We know Constance Blackhall is a woman, so it should say Richard Dunwich and his sister Constance Blackhall. Aside from that wobble, the part about an ancient temple to dark gods and human sacrifice lines up with what we saw at Dunwich Borers and elsewhere, so I've no reason to question its veracity. It's the first time Richard Dunwich ever comes up too, but since both his name and his connection to Constance Blackhall are featured in a message in Fallout 76, I think we can also consider that side of things to be canon. On the next page, there's more about occult and how a monolith to the forgotten god may be what's at the bottom of the quarry, but it's all very speculative, as is the idea shared that the rumblings heard and felt there may be something terrible shifting underneath the ground. What I love about this whole story up to this point is that you're left to figure out most of it on your own, and here I think too much is spoon-fed to you by a source who licensed the Fallout universe from Bethesda and may not be an authority on it. Nothing particularly egregious is included, but at the same time it does chip away at some of the mystique. Between what happens in Fallout 3's Dunwich Building and Fallout 4's Dunwich Borers, Point Lookout's The Dark Heart of Blackhall quest, and the additional lore gathered from outside the game, there is a massive amount to take in. It does mean, however, that we're in a better position than ever to try and figure out exactly what the story is. I'm going to try and work through it all as clearly and succinctly as I possibly can. Examining the commonalities is a good place to start. Every location has something buried in its depths. In the caves below the Dunwich Building there is an obelisk, apparently also an altar, much like at Point Lookout's ritual site and the Quarry. Incidentally, we must also remember that Obadiah Blackhall has his own altar in the basement of his family's manor. There is evidence of attempts to perform a ritual at each. A terminal in the Dunwich Building transcribed Jamie muttering to himself along with the sound of screaming and twisting, presumably his victim, and an impact sound like an object being used to kill them. He also uses the phrase, "no light, no flesh." Speaking of no flesh, at the ritual site there is a flayed corpse whose head has been replaced with a doll pierced with a ritual knife, with the Kriveknir meters away. At Dunwich Borers, you see an unnamed man holding a knife in front of many bound people, and soon after find the weapon in question, the sacrificial blade, Krem's Tooth. In Obadiah's basement lies the headless body of a swamp person on an altar, with many skeletons littering the surrounding area, a hint perhaps that he, his ancestors, or both, have tried unsuccessfully to perform the ritual many times. 3 of the locations are also somehow able to exert their influence over people, or they certainly try to. You can hear voices in the Dunwich Building's caves. Much like in the ritual site's temple. And while we don't hear anything ourselves during our time at Dunwich Borers, Hugo's holotape suggests he was experiencing something similar too.
I could kill them all. No, that wouldn't be what it would want.
What we do hear within the quarry, however, is a near constant rumbling that becomes more frequent as you progress, which is also mentioned in the safety first section on the terminals. There is a chance this is related to the statue buried there. Equally, we know that the company was skimping on the beams needed to properly support the site, so it could be a consequence of their cost cutting as the quarry sags under its own weight the deeper you journey. I consider the hallucination which occurs in the Dunwich Building, as well as that in the quarry, to be in the same vein, another trick caused by the power emanating from both areas. The presence of radiation and subsequently often ghouls is also not unusual. The Dunwich obelisk emits radiation, and Jamie, the man who turned to a ghoul while there searching for his father, talks about intruders becoming like him, and both the Dunwich Building and Dunwich borers are chock full of ghouls. The ritual site also has water which gives off radiation, as does the pool where you find the statue Altar and Krem's Tooth in the quarry. Hugo also ends his own life in a heavily irradiated area, a bid one would guess to return as a ghoul. Finally, there's the Krivbeknir, Krem's Tooth, and Ugh-Qualtoth. The Krivbeknir, for all intents and purposes the Book of the Dead, a tome containing details on how to summon ancient beings, was sought after by the Swamp Folk and Obadiah Blackhall for their rituals, and we also know Jamie had it in his possession at the Dunwich Building before someone took it to Point Lookout. We are also told explicitly that it shares its origins with the Dunwich Building's obelisk. Krem's Tooth only appears in Dunwich Borers and isn't mentioned by name anywhere else, but the use of a knife is a running theme. See Jamie talking about it.
Sharp knife. Sharp knife to send him to Deep Temple. Play and say my words.
Or the ritual knife lodged in the doll by the Swamp Folk. Ugh-Qualtoth, a being of some description, is mentioned several times during Jamie's transcribed ramblings, and Obadiah speaks of it too.
Ugh-Qualtoth is returned. Be afraid, worms.
We also know there is something below the quarry, although it could very well just be a statue. Everything I've just summarised helps paint a relatively clear picture, or at least I think it does. Before the war, Richard Dunwich and his sister Constance Blackhall had a shared passion for the occult. Richard used his company, Dunwich Borers, to excavate ancient ruins he hoped to use to harness dark powers, with rituals likely involving human sacrifice being performed within them. Constance started a sect based around the Krivbeknir, which heavily impacted Point Lookout's local culture. We don't know what happened to Richard, but we know that Constance was able to live an unnaturally long life, only passing when the book was stolen from her. There's a gap in our knowledge here, although we do know the Krivbeknir eventually ended up in the hands of Jamie Parablas's father, who journeyed to the Dunwich Building hoping to destroy it. He was unsuccessful and eventually turned into a ghoul, with Jamie suffering a similar fate soon after he entered the building looking for him. Jamie managed to get his hands on the book, but an unknown person or group took it from him, with it ending up back in Point Lookout. In the depths of the building, Jamie remained, and that is where we first jumped into the story. Based on what occurs after, I believe 4 people or groups have been attempting to perform the same ritual: Jamie in the Dunwich Building, the Swamp Folk at the ritual site, Obadiah in his basement, and the Dunwich Borers Company at the quarry, and they were all likely trying to summon a being known as Ugh-Qualtoth. However, it seems as if over time the method for how to properly perform the ritual has been lost. To quote Fallout 3's official game guide, all that's left is a collection of incoherent chants and rituals, their meanings long forgotten. It's likely all of the following are needed. First, it needs to be performed at a site imbued with otherworldly powers. Then, a sacrifice must be made, which involves removing the victim's skin and stabbing or removing their head with a knife. Krem's Tooth is probably the specific sacrificial blade which needs to be used. Incidentally, Jamie says on the terminal, Deep Temple born, Deep Temple died, and that is a nod to those first 2 requirements. Deep Temple born refers to bringing back Ugh-Qualtoth within one of these mysterious places, and Deep Temple died refers to someone being stabbed in the temple, part of their head, to facilitate that process. While all of that is being done, words from the Krivbeknir also need to be spoken, hence it being so sought after. Everyone managed to get it partially correct, but given Ugh-Qualtoth isn't strolling around the Fallout universe, not entirely. Jamie and the Swamp Folk may have been closest, with both perhaps lacking only Krem's Tooth. Obadiah's basement isn't a place with magical properties, he didn't have Krem's Tooth and his victim wasn't flayed, so a lot was missing there. We see no evidence of the Krivbeknir being present during the Dunwich Borers flashback, and we've no idea whether they knew precisely how to perform the sacrifice either. To put it bluntly, no one has yet come along with all the knowledge and items needed to make the dark magic finally happen. There are several parts of the story where the details are less clear, the presence of ghouls and the influence the sites have on people being the main ones. With Constance Blackhall managing to live far longer than she should have, she must have known how to at least somewhat harness the Krebeknir's power. I think the ghouls are a twisted byproduct of it being used without proper knowledge, like when the failed rituals were performed. The ghouls live an unnaturally long life too, but not in the same way Constance, who had more knowledge, did. The voices, I'd guess, are simply whatever entity or entities are present doing their best to get someone to release them. However, the places they can be heard also tend to have a lot of radiation, so we can't rule out the possibility of them and the hallucinations being nothing more than an effect of sickness. So there we have it, that's my theory of how everything I've spoken about is connected. I know this has been a hefty old video, so I won't keep you much longer, but I do want to add one last thing. I'm rather hoping this is as far as the story goes. Nothing is scarier than the unknown, and this is a tale in danger of losing some of its effect should anything else be revealed. I've not played Fallout 76 yet, so I've no idea if it continues, but honestly, at this stage, I think it's best to let sleeping gods lie. Thanks for watching the video, boys, girls and vault dwellers. If you had an unsettlingly good time, do consider liking, subscribing and sharing your theories, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon.